Post-Dobbs, it is a dark world for women, and it will become even darker if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have their way. According to the former Trump administration officials over at the Heritage Foundation, they plan on curbing what they call abortion tourism. And what they really mean is they would stop women who live in states that are reproductive health care deserts from traveling to another state for care. They would then want the Centers for Disease Control to implement a mandatory nationwide collection of private medical data to track abortions and to give police the power to talk to your doctors about your gynecological care, just in case they want to prosecute you. If your state doesn't want to comply, they'll simply cut funding until they do. The guy who wrote that Project 2025 section, Roger Severino, wants to nationalize abortion bans. And his wife helped Leonard Leo pick the 3 justices who stole reproductive rights from American women. Severino could very well be in the next Trump administration, and his wife would help fill the next Supreme Court vacancies. Senator J.D. Vance has been an early proponent of this kind of vaginal vigilantism. He was one of only 8 Republican senators who opposed the Biden administration when it prevented state law enforcement from tracking your menstrual cycles. Unsurprisingly, Trump told Time magazine that it is up to the states. Joining me now is Scott Galloway, NYU professor, host of the Prof G Pod, and co-host of the Pivot podcast. Scott Galloway, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. This all, I think, to a lot of people sounds like crazy Handmaid's Tale stuff, but it's very real. I mean, there is this world in which these men want to force women to be incubators. Can you talk a little bit more about where this ideology kind of comes from?
I think it comes from a pretty dark place, Joy. I mean, did you 4 years ago think we'd be sitting in America where 1 in 5 women have to leave their state to terminate a pregnancy? And I actually don't think there's really any chance it'll be totally outlawed, because I think the most mendacious thing about this movement right now, or this trend, is not that it's an attack on women, but it's an attack on poor women. I just think that if J.D. Vance's nephew and his girlfriend or wife were to get pregnant, they'd be able to figure it out. I think this is absolutely targeting, if you will have the biggest impact on mostly poor women of color who don't have the resources to find a way out here. So in addition, I mean, essentially, on a broader level, this has impacts globally. Trump tried to reinstate a global gag rule that would reduce funding to even talk about family planning to international groups. And I think the most mendacious thing about this, or the most upsetting thing about this, is, let me say the quiet part out loud. If we elect somebody who's been found guilty by a jury of his peers of sexual assault, which in any language is rape, who calls women horseface or fat pigs, haven't we as a nation basically said we are normalizing misogyny?
Yes. I mean, yes. And I will say that I was one of the people who absolutely could imagine we'd be here, because those of us who've been, and I'm sure you have as well, been following what they used to call the pro-life movement, what I call the forced birth movement. They've been literally saying they were going to do this since I was in high school or junior high school. And they've always said they were going to do it as soon as they got a Supreme Court that would do it. And people elected Donald Trump anyway. And that is, to me, the disconnect, is that he said he was going to put justices on the court that would overturn Roe. They did it, and people acted shocked. But talk a little bit about this manosphere thing, because if you pay any attention to it, that's what they want. They don't even think women should have the right to vote necessarily, because they genuinely believe, and I think in all sincerity, that women have no place in public life outside of the kitchen.
Yeah, look, this is frightening, and it is kind of season 9 of The Handmaid's Tale. What I'm trying to focus on, and I think warrants more attention, is, all right, how do we make sure that Vice President Harris is elected and this dystopia doesn't come to bear? And what's unusual about that discussion is that we thought this election was going to be a referendum on women's rights and bodily autonomy. And quite frankly, Vice President Harris has probably kind of locked up the young female vote. What I think wins or loses this election, Joy, is, ironically, whose vision for masculinity wins here. Because a lot of young men are not so much moving towards the Republican Party. Your network has spoke very cogently about what is the largest gender divide in history across the parties among young people. It's not men moving towards the Republican Party. They are just as supportive of gender rights as every other group. They're moving away from the Democratic Party because, quite frankly, they don't feel seen. If you go to the DNC's website, it says explicitly who we serve. And it lists 16 demographic groups that, as far as I can tell, cover about 75% of the population, or specifically don't cover young men. So in some, they don't feel seen. And the Democratic Party right now is facing the same issue that many universities in the DEI apparatus has seen, and that is when you're explicitly advocating for 75% of the population, are you advocating and representing them, or are you discriminating against the 25%? So and also, we never miss an opportunity. The Infrastructure Act will result in 70% of those new jobs will go to men without necessarily college degrees, but they didn't want to talk about it. The real opportunity here is this vision of masculinity, I think, represented by Walz. It's more one of what I call protection and service, as opposed to toughness and strength, where the Republican Party is trying to go. And I think the best example of that, and it's a wonderful image, is a football coach enlisting his players because the LGBT community at that high school, and this is a true story, felt bullied, and enlisting them, saying, you don't need to understand this, but men move to protection. So ironically, I think our ability to protect women is going to be based on who has a better, more appealing vision of masculinity that appeals to what is becoming the key swing voter group here, and that is young men.
That is so brilliantly said and so fascinating. Scott Galloway, thank you. I appreciate that. Everybody at least listen to your podcast. I'm going to listen to it as well. Thank you very much. Well said.